You open your eyes for the first time inside total darkness, still connected to your mother, and you are already 400 pounds and 8 feet long. This is your life as an orca, and it starts the instant your mother's body pushes you out after a pregnancy that lasted almost a year and a half. Your tail flukes and your dorsal fin are still soft right now, curled up from being folded inside her for so long, and they will stiffen within hours. Your mother has been carrying you for somewhere between 15 and 18 months, 17 months on average, longer than almost any pregnancy you've ever heard of. Killer whales aren't really one single species spread evenly across the planet. Researchers now recognize multiple distinct ecotypes, some different enough that they may eventually be classified as separate species entirely. Which ecotype you're born into decides almost everything about the life ahead of you, your hunting style, your dialect, even how long you're likely to live. Some ecotypes stay almost entirely in one region their whole lives, while others range across enormous stretches of ocean, and researchers are still mapping exactly how many distinct populations exist worldwide. Your mother won't have another surviving calf for another 3 to 5 years after you, sometimes longer, because raising you successfully takes almost all of her energy and attention. Orcas don't pair for life the way some animals do. Both males and females mate with multiple partners across their lives, so your father likely isn't a constant presence in your world. The very first thing that happens to you is the most dangerous moment of your entire life, because you have to breathe, and you cannot do it alone. Your mother and 1 or 2 other females from the pod, the ones researchers call aunties, position themselves beneath you and push you toward the surface for your first breath. They will keep doing this for hours if they have to, using their own bodies to stop you from sinking before your muscles learn how to swim. This is exhausting for them, physically costly in a way marine biologists have documented closely, and it tells you something about how this pod works from your very first minute alive. Nobody had to teach your mother and her sisters to do this. The surfacing support behavior has been documented in both wild pods and in captive settings for decades, across multiple ecotypes. More precisely, your birth weight sits somewhere between 80 and 220 kilograms, and your body stretches to roughly 4 to 7 meters, numbers researchers have measured across dozens of documented resident births. Statistically, you have somewhere between a 40 and 50% chance of surviving your first year, a number that varies sharply depending on the year and your mother's condition. Researchers tracking the southern residents specifically have watched that survival rate swing noticeably from cohort to cohort, tied closely to how much salmon was available to nursing mothers that particular season. If you make it, your mother's milk is waiting, and it is richer than almost any other marine mammals, close to 40% fat, by some measurements on a dry weight basis. That richness is exactly why you grow so fast in your first year, packing on weight and strength while your survival odds are still at their most fragile. You will nurse for 1 to 2 years, but you won't actually stop following your mother and learning from her for years after you're technically weaned. Even once you stop nursing, you'll spend years shadowing her on hunts, learning to read her body language before you learn to hunt anything successfully on your own. Somewhere in your first months, you start hearing the sounds that will define the rest of your life. The specific clicks and whistles and calls of your own pod. Every matriline, every family line of related females and their children has its own distinct set of these calls, almost like a regional accent passed down for generations. Researchers John Ford and Graham Ellis spent decades at the Pacific Biological Station in British Columbia cataloging these dialects, and an experienced listener can identify your specific pod just from a recording. This isn't instinct, it's culture. Learned sound passed from adult to calf the same way any language gets passed down inside a family. In the rare documented cases where a young orca has drifted between pods, its calls end up blending both dialects, direct proof that you're learning this, not simply born already knowing it. Matrilines that share a dialect are grouped into what researchers call a clan, and clans that share some acoustic features, but not others, form the wider community you belong to. If you happen to be born into the southern resident community, one of 3 pods labeled J, K, or L, your entire population number is only in the low 70s today. That makes you part of one of the most endangered marine mammal populations on the planet, listed as endangered under both American and Canadian law. If instead you're born into the northern resident community, your world is bigger, an estimated population of more than 300 individuals, listed as threatened rather than endangered under Canadian law. Both communities have had their calls cataloged in exhaustive detail, but the size difference between them shows how differently 2 closely related orca populations can be doing at the same time. As you grow, the next thing you have to learn is how to eat, and this is where your specific family's culture becomes the difference between life and death. If your matrilene hunts near Antarctica, you'll learn wave washing, swimming in tight formation toward a craybeater or Weddell seal resting on an ice floe and generating a wave to knock it into the water. Researchers studying this same Antarctic population have also documented these type B orcas preying on humpback whales in the area, showing just how far their cooperative hunting range actually extends. If you're born off the coast of Patagonia, you'll learn something almost nobody else on Earth does, deliberately beaching yourself on the sand to grab a sea lion pup. Only the females in that specific population do this, and it's passed from older individuals down to daughters, not something every matriline in the region has even adopted. It's one of the riskiest hunting techniques documented anywhere in the species, because a miscalculated wave means being stranded on sand with no way back to the water at all. If your pod fishes off the coast of Norway, you'll learn carousel feeding, herding herring into a tight ball at the surface, then stunning them one by one with a slap of your tail. Researchers, including two Simile, have documented this technique for years in the Tysfjord region of Norway, where entire pods coordinate to keep the herring ball from scattering while individuals take turns feeding. And if you're born near South Africa, you might grow into the kind of orca that hunts great white sharks, extracting and eating specifically the liver, a behavior first documented around 2017. Two individuals researchers named Port and Starboard became notorious for exactly this near Seal Island in False Bay, a hunting style found almost nowhere else on the planet. Researchers first documented this behavior in localized events along the South African coast starting around 2017, and it remains rare enough that most orca populations elsewhere have never been observed attempting it at all. If you're a Pacific Northwest resident like your southern resident cousins, your whole world will revolve around salmon, herded cooperatively with your entire family working together as a unit. Whichever technique your family teaches you, one thing stays constant: transient orcas hunting marine mammals stay almost completely silent while hunting, because their prey can hear echolocation clicks coming. Resident orcas hunting fish, by contrast, can afford to be noisy, because fish can't hear the same frequencies, and that single difference shapes an entire hunting culture. So if you're born a transient hunting seals and other marine mammals along the North Pacific, you'll learn to hunt almost silently, using stealth instead of the noisy group calls your resident cousins rely on. That vocal difference alone is enough for researchers listening on a hydrophone to guess whether they're tracking a fish-eating or a mammal-eating population, long before they see a single dorsal fin. As you move into adulthood, your social world settles into a structure that's almost unheard of anywhere else in the animal kingdom, and it depends entirely on whether you're male or female. If you're male, you will never leave your mother, not when you reach sexual maturity in your late teens or 20s, not even after you father calves of your own, elsewhere. Most male mammals disperse from their birth family around the time they mature, but you will stay by your mother's side for as long as she lives. Researcher Emma Foster at the University of Exeter, building on decades of work by the late Ken Balcombe at the Center for Whale Research, found something remarkable about this bond. In the year after a mother dies, her adult sons face more than double the risk of dying themselves, even though they're full-grown and still capable of reproducing. Researchers sometimes describe this pattern informally as the mama's boy effect, and it holds even for males who are physically enormous, fully capable hunters, well past the age most mammals would be considered independent. Nobody fully understands why the bond matters this much biologically, but the pattern shows up consistently enough across different pods that it's now treated as one of the most reliable findings in orca research. If you're female, your path looks completely different, because you'll spend your 30s and early 40s transitioning through something almost no other species on Earth experiences: menopause. Long before that, you reach sexual maturity yourself somewhere around 10 to 15 years old, while the males around you mature at a similar age but usually don't successfully father a calf until their late teens or 20s. As an adult female, you hold your own position within the matriline, and older matriarchs are the ones who direct the group during feeding, using accumulated experience the younger females haven't had time to build yet. Orcas are one of only a small handful of species where females stop reproducing decades before they actually die, alongside short-finned pilot whales and possibly some beluga populations and humans. The leading explanation researchers point to is that an older female gains more by helping her existing children and grandchildren survive than by continuing to compete for resources with her own daughters. In most mammal species, including nearly every primate, females keep reproducing right up until close to the end of life, which makes your biology genuinely unusual even within your own family tree. Researchers led by Croft and colleagues have calculated that your post-reproductive years, on average, stretch more than 20 years beyond the age you last actually gave birth. Once you stop reproducing, you don't step back from the pod, you become one of its most important members, especially during years when food is scarce. This is the grandmother effect, and it's been measured directly. Calves whose grandmother is alive and present have significantly higher survival rates, especially in low salmon years. Researchers believe this is because older females carry decades of accumulated ecological knowledge, remembering where the fish were during past hard years, knowledge younger females simply haven't lived long enough to gather. The same team at the University of Exeter has tracked declining salmon runs in recent years, finding that when an older matriarch dies during a lean year, the mortality of the males in her family rises even further. That finding is one of the clearest pieces of evidence that what she carries in memory, not just her presence, is what's actually keeping parts of her family alive during hard seasons. One southern resident matriarch, known as Granny or J2, is estimated to have been born in 1911 and was last confirmed alive in 2016, making her roughly 98 years old. That would make her one of the longest-lived cetaceans ever documented, a nearly century-long life spent leading her family through 9 decades of changing oceans. Her exact birth year is an estimate rather than a certainty, since nobody was tagging southern resident orcas in 1911, but decades of consistent sighting records place her among the oldest known individuals in the population. If you're a healthy female, you can expect to live anywhere from 50 to 80 years, sometimes longer, while males more typically live 30 to 50 years, occasionally reaching 60. That gap between male and female lifespan is itself connected to the maternal bond. Males without their mothers simply don't survive as long, on average, as those who still have her. As you grow old, your body starts to slow, and eventually, surrounded by the matriline that raised you, taught you to hunt, and depended on your knowledge for decades, you will die. What happens next, for the family you leave behind, is some of the most emotional behavior ever documented in a marine mammal, and one case, in particular, defined how we understand it. In late July of 2018, a southern resident female named Tahlequah, known to researchers as J35, gave birth to a calf that died within about an hour of being born. Instead of letting the body go, Tahlequah carried it balanced on her head, keeping it at the surface with every single breath she took for the next 17 days straight. Her pod's route over those 17 days covered roughly 600 kilometers, nearly 1,000 miles, across the Salish Sea, and back and forth over the border between the US and Canada. Research teams and shore observers documented the entire journey, and it only ended around August 11th, when Tahlequah finally let the calf's body go. Scientists studying grief-like behavior across cetacean species have documented similar carrying behavior in humpback whales and other orcas, but nothing as extended or as closely observed as what Tahlequah did. That single behavior, more than any statistic about lifespan or hunting technique, is what convinced a generation of researchers that what orcas experience around death looks a lot like mourning. Scientists have since compared her 17-day carry against other documented cases across cetacean species, and while dead calf carrying shows up elsewhere, nothing else recorded has matched its length or how closely it was observed by shore teams. For Tahlequah's own pod, the J-pod of the southern residents, her 17 days on the water became one of the most closely watched events in the population's entire recorded history. So that's the whole arc. From your first desperate breath, held up by your mother and her sisters, to the calls you learn as an infant, to the hunting style passed down through your family. Through the decades you spend as an adult, whether you're a son who never leaves his mother's side or a daughter who becomes a grandmother carrying knowledge for the whole pod, all the way to the end of your life, surrounded by family that has known you since the moment you first broke the surface for air. 90 years of biology, compressed into a single continuous story, and every single stage of it was written into the ocean long before any of us started studying it closely. From the calf who can't survive its own first breath without help, to the grandmother who can't help her family survive a lean year without the memory she's carried for decades, the entire arc runs on the same thread, connection that doesn't break with age. Whether you're male, tied to your mother for as long as she lives, or female, becoming the keeper of the pod's knowledge once your own reproductive years end, the story is never really about you alone, it's about the family carrying you through it. Watching a species build such different survival strategies from ocean to ocean is a reminder of just how much variety life finds, even within a single species carrying the same name. If you want to see what a completely different kind of animal life looks like, one built entirely around a different hunting culture, I've got a video breaking down exactly that right here.